Forensics Lecture 7-2, Testing for Intoxication. Intoxication is typically monitored by blood alcohol level and drawing the blood from a vein to test motorists for intoxication obviously is not convenient. So toxicologists devise a rapid, specific way for measuring the degree of intoxication easily administered within the field, so out on the road. That test is the breath test for alcohol. It's a simple device for collecting and measuring alcohol content in the alveolar breath, which is the deep breathing, because this is where it's entering in from the capillaries. During the absorption phase of a breath test, however, it can show a higher reading than the venous blood, but after the absorption, there actually is no difference, or a very minimal difference between the blood test and the breath test. And the breath tester, it operates on an infrared light absorption. It's designed to analyze a set volume of breath. It captures the breath and then it exposes it to infrared light. The degree of the interaction between the light and the alcohol in the breath sample allows the instrument to measure the BAC. The key, though, is capturing the alveolar air. Again, like I said, the deep lung air. And again, it's because this is where the blood alcohol enters in. So there are guidelines in which the officer takes into account as they're doing the breath test. Breathalyzer used to be used, no longer is used because of the chemicals that are in it. Now using the infrared light makes it a little bit more safe, per se. Another test that they use is called the field sobriety test, and this is to estimate the degree of physical impairment and whether or not a breath or a blood test is actually justified to be taken. There are three psychophysical tests that are used and considered reliable. There's the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, the walk and turn test, and the one leg stand test. They also may have a handheld roadside breath tester that can be used to determine the preliminary breath alcohol content and see whether they have probable cause to bring them in for driving under the influence. So the three tests, the horizontal gaze nystagmus test is basically an involuntary jerking of the eye as the eye moves to the side. So if you're looking straight ahead and you're following something and you're moving your eyes as far as they can go to the side, they're going to have a jerk to them. Subjects are asked to follow a pen light or another object with their eyes as far to the side as they can go. The more intoxicated a person is, the sooner the jerking will start. It's usually about 45 degrees. The walk and turn test, along with the one leg test, are tests that are testing their divided attention, basically. They're testing subjects' ability to comprehend and execute two or more simple tasks at one time. Intoxication impairs that ability. So the walk and turn test, the subject is asked to walk a straight line, heel to toe, for 9 steps, then turn around and repeat the process the other way. Typically is followed by the one leg test, which requires the subject to maintain balance with their heels together while listening to what they need to do. And then the suspect is asked to stand on one foot while holding their foot several inches above the ground for 30 seconds. At the same time, they're asked to count those 30 seconds out loud. And so the more intoxicated an individual is, the less likely they are to be able to carry those tasks out. The best test for alcohol blood level is to test the blood. The most widely used approach is the gas chromatography, which we discussed in the last chapter. And what they do is they send it through the chromatographer, which gives them a reading in the detector, and they compare the peak areas of the suspect to the known standard of alcohol, and then investigators can then calculate the BAC. When collecting and preserving blood, it must always be drawn under medical accepted conditions by a qualified individual. And when they're preparing, a non-alcoholic disinfectant must be applied before the suspect's blood is drawn, so that they can't argue what was the disinfectant that led to the reading. After it's drawn, blood's preserved in an airtight container after an anticoagulant and a preservative have been added. An anticoagulant is going to prevent the blood from clotting. And then the preservative inhibits any growth of microorganisms that can destroy the blood sample. From there, it's then stored in a refrigerator, so a cool environment, and delivered to toxicology. There's no evidence that the cool temperature lessens or increases the blood alcohol content. However, if a preservative isn't added to it, it can disintegrate the alcohol content because it's destroying the sample. When we look at alcohol and the law, actually before 1972, 0.15% was actually considered under the influence, and then by 1972, impairment level was lowered to 0.08%, and that was actually later adopted by all states. There is a constitutional issue with obtaining blood samples or a breathalyzer test, and it actually comes in the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees that all citizens are protected from self-incrimination. In other words, against being forced to make an admission that would prove one's own guilt. And this was said to violate the Fifth Amendment. A breath test could be considered self-incrimination. To prevent refusal, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration recommended an implied consent law, and this states that operation of a motor vehicle on a public highway automatically carries the stipulation that a driver will submit a test for alcohol intoxication if requested, or be subject to loss of license. This ends Lecture 7-2. There is a quiz next class.